Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. That's right, it's No Soundbites Allowed, brought to you by Larry Sharp, my very good friend of well over a decade, and we are at Freedom Fest 2024. Now, you may hear some sounds in the background. That happens to be RFK, which we are recording live for people right now. But we're also taking the opportunity, while everyone else is not paying attention, to get the real scoop, the real interesting details on what's happening around the rest of the world, not just the American election. The rest of the world is moving forward. And to do that, I have with us today Preity Upala, and she's going to be speaking with us about India, Southeast China, everything that is going on. And you've heard me talking about the third region that may be in a war, hopefully not by 2028. Let's talk about that. Let's understand this with someone who has far more knowledge than myself. Preity, how are you doing today?
Namaste, namaste, and thank you for inviting me on your wonderful show. It's such a pleasure and an honor to have this great conversation, a very important conversation, I think. And it's great to be at Freedom Fest speaking, and it's been quite a great event. Spectacular turnout and so much conversation on what it means, I think, to be American and America's path forward.
Oh, that's what this is all about, the path forward and how how we're going to shape the world. And the world will shape us too, but we will shape it very definitively. Now, we got lucky because we just ran into each other yesterday, and we wound up into this very deep conversation and said, more people should hear about this. So this will be a little bit more free form, although we have a couple of things we want to hit on. And I think it'll be very informative for a lot of people. Before we do, a little bit about your background. Share that with my audience.
Well, I'm a former investment banker from Australia, but now I work in media, politics, and entertainment. I'm married with three, so I'm a geopolitical analyst, speak around the world on those issues and others. I am writing a book, but I do a lot of writing for various publications. And I have my own show as well, the Preity Experience, where I I have conversations with global leaders on these very topics. I talk a lot about diplomacy and peace, and my whole perspective is the international point of view. I think we are all global citizens, or I know I am, and the world is a global village. And I think sometimes that gets lost. Especially being here in America, you don't realize that there's this great big world out there. But I'm still very connected to Hollywood as a presenter and a producer. I do many other things too, but that's just a brief, sort of bio of what I do. I work with governments all around the world and think tanks, and I have my own company too, my own think tank called the Omnia Institute, and we advocate for peace, diplomacy, we talk about soft power, working with governments, consulting on geopolitical risks, and talking about geoeconomics and so on.
And for those who are wondering, if you want to go to the Preity Experience, that is Preity. Just so you know. I know everyone's saying it's pretty. No, it's Preity. Gotta get it right. So, obviously there's a lot in that. As a woman, as a mother, that's a lot to handle. That's a huge resume there. And no one would ever expect that she's mom of three. Trust me, I've seen her walking around. You wouldn't have expected that. It's fantastic.
I am not a mother, just letting
I thought you
know.
said three.
No.
Oh, I missed that. Ah, see,
I have three children and I look like this, I would be the happiest person on the planet.
I thought that's what you said.
No, I don't have children.
I'm an idiot. See, I get things wrong too, folks. Sorry. But
I thought you were kidding there for a second.
I thought I heard you.
No.
I misheard. That's fine. Not a problem. Which still doesn't take away from the resume of all the things that you've done. It would have just been an extra addition. But we're talking about global impact. We're talking about world peace, which is in danger at this time. The 2024 election will be important. Right now we have Prime Minister Modi just won his election, which upset a few people. Tensions with China are rising, as China is also raising tensions with the Philippines Japan, South Korea, pretty much all simultaneously.
Pretty much all of their neighbors and non-neighbors.
And North Korea
Yes.
is not to be taken lightly in this process either. So, with all of that happening, and the United States is really focused on the election, some of us are looking around the world. How is the world looking at the U.S.?
Wow, well, I just spent 2 months in Europe and Africa. I just got back literally a week ago. And I have to say, the global consensus on America is very poor. They are laughing at us. We are the laughing stock of the planet right now. They think our leadership is a joke. They don't trust us. They think we have a circus running the show here, and they don't believe that we are the leaders that we always claim that we are, and they just don't. They're even skeptical of sort of getting involved deeper, and this is just the street. I imagine, political and government level, it's very similar. So it's very sad, I have to say. I think America is lost right now. It's trying to find its soul. It's trying to find its path, the next step forward, to really claim its power, its identity, and its integrity, and be this great leader that we all know it is meant to be and can be and has been in the past, but is not to be. So the verdict, the prognosis for the U.S. is not good. I think U.S. tourists traveling everywhere, they're not very proud to say that they're from America at the moment. So it's been interesting. I think Europe also looks at America in a different lens. They're very insular there themselves. They like to make, like we are the big, easy target there. For them to make themselves feel a little bit more significant.
Well, that's...
And a bit say, everyone does it. But in Europe, I've noticed it's a little interesting. Asia, it doesn't happen so much. And Africa, it happens in a different way, which is funny. But Europe is very specific. They really have they still think their old world is still around and this empire still exists, which it doesn't, thank God. UK is the same thing, they're like...
Oh yeah, the UK has a chip on it. Absolutely.
That'll never go away. Because I think America has gone so much further ahead.
Oh yeah. They're our distant cousins at this point, rather than being our brothers. Now, one of the things that have been very recent history, looking at the Sudan, looking at Afghanistan, India's been very good about protecting its people. And I think that's one of the contrasts that the world has seen. In Afghanistan, Joe Biden abandoned 5,000 Americans. Ukraine, 10,000. In the Sudan last year, 16,000, 40,000 in Haiti this year. But we have a comparison. India got all of their people out of Afghanistan in flying 747s non-stop to do so. And in the Sudan, they had 8 times more people were taken out of Sudan, and 16,000 Americans were left behind. America got 300 people. And I think that kind of reflects why we're seeing the rest of the world say, well, America's missing a step. The leadership have failed because India, not to put India down, it's a major nation, but when people look at world powers, they don't go India, America in that order.
It's coming up that way.
It is moving up.
It's moving up fast.
So I wonder...
despite its lack of all the resources that the U.S. has, it's still doing in many departments it excels, and this is one of them, I think. So it's always been like that. Even 50 years ago, the one thing the Indian state has always done is never abandon its citizens anywhere around the world. I'm surprised, across governments, across different prime ministers and leadership. I don't know what it is. It's just something about, even though we are this huge country, 1 billion people in India, and this diaspora is, I think, the largest diaspora in the world, almost 50 million, I think, globally. There's an Indian out there that needs help. The government, the MEA, the foreign office is so good at instantly doing, whether it's passport or helping somebody who needs help or evacuating someone from crisis, war zones. They've been so good at that. And the funny thing is, the only country that was able to stop that conflict in Russia and Ukraine was India, For 6 hours, it managed to halt in the middle of a war. It halted it so the planes could go in and get the 20,000 Indians out. And once they were out, it resumed. And both Russia and Ukraine unanimously agreed and respected that request. Even if America had asked that, they wouldn't have said yes.
And that's really impressive and somewhat scary, considering that the U.S., we have Ramstein Air Base in Germany. 2.5 hours. We could have flown C-130s, picked up all the kids, picked up all the moms, and flown them. It would cost $5 million, and it's nothing. And yet we didn't, but India did.
Priorities. It's not the priority for them, I think. And I've heard this time and again from U.S. citizens around the world in trouble, and they just haven't been helped in the way that I think other governments have helped their citizens. This is not new. We keep hearing stories like this all the time.
But that brings up Modi, who's not, well, he's mixed. He's got a lot of mixed views, both in India and around the world. And there are a lot of concerns with him. And some have said that, I've read, I believe it was in Deutsche Welle, where...
That's not a great outlet, by the way. They love to do a lot of misreporting, especially on India. I don't know why they have this, something with their editorial board. The narratives that they take for some reason on India are some of the worst, in line with Al Jazeera and state-sponsored ragtag outlets. Yeah.
Okay,
be careful.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
And
now your audience knows. Yeah.
And Deutsche Welle, for those who don't know, is the German news.
State. Yeah.
And they are considered a credible news station, but every organization,
definitely.
New York Times is very left-leaning, so
yes.
they all have their...
Similar thing.
But they had mentioned that Modi could be part of the factor of why there is a conflict right now between India and China on a mutual border. And it's been pushing, shoving, literally, armies pushing and shoving each other, hitting each other with sticks and stones.
Because they don't want to fire bullets and kill each other that way.
Right.
Yeah, so they both agreed to not fire a shot. Yeah.
But it escalates. And the tension, more importantly, on the political level, is virtually at war. Yeah. And is Modi helping that, or is he making that worse?
I think it's ridiculous for Germany to, in a conflict between India and China, to think that India is the rogue actor here. I think the whole world knows that China has conflicts with all of its neighbors. It has 55 different border conflicts as we speak. Half of them aren't even with countries that they share a land border with. So they are doing this all around the world. They're aggressive. They want to expand. They illegally occupy territory. They're doing this with everybody. They all illegally occupy Tibet and many other regions. I think everybody knows this. So despite knowing all of that, if your takeaway, big takeaway with this, what's going on Indian-Chinese border is that India is the aggressor, I think you need to get some help and really go back to reading history. And like seriously, I'm shocked at some of the reporting, because it's funny, because every other outlet that has reported on this particular conflict, they never say that India is the aggressor.
No.
It's always like China is illegally occupying parts of Indian territory that probably India wasn't keeping an eye on or didn't protect.
So it's pretty sparse. The area is pretty sparse where they're fighting.
It's very porous, it's very ambiguous, but that doesn't mean that you just come and take it. And, and the Chinese saw an opportunity, and India has, thankfully, definitely, they've acted on it. So there's, I think, either 100 or 200,000 strong armies total. These are the two largest armies in the world. They're literally facing off each other. And it's funny because we don't have a nuclear holocaust, even though these two nuclear states are, because both are mature. Even China has agreed that they are not going to escalate in that way. They escalate in different ways, maybe, but they're not going there. So thankfully, they're both level-headed. Had this been two other countries, it would have been very ugly by now.
So we don't expect it to be more like, say, what China's doing in Southeast Asia Sea with Philippines, where they've been encroaching on the Coast Guard.
Yeah, Senkaku Islands and all of those, they do it with Japan and all over. All of these countries have their grievances with China. They have had for decades. They try to get the West to intervene and do something about it, but the West doesn't do anything. And it's funny, Europe always has this, they're addicted to the Chinese fix. They need to cure themselves, I think, from a trade perspective and all of that. They have to, because it's all intertwined. And you have to look at all of this in a very different light and really look at it from a geopolitical, humanitarian, like good, bad way, and do the moral thing, for God's sake, It's not all about business and power, and you don't have the balls to call out, I guess, a bigger country than yourself with a bigger army and a nuclear power. But that's on you. Because they're hurting you as well as much as they're hurting everyone else. And tomorrow that's going to be you. But Modi has, I think what the Indian government is doing, and it's not just his decision as a military and intelligence as well, but they are very careful not to escalate it. They're careful not to make it uglier than what it is, and they are definitely not trying to be the ones to, they don't want to take the first steps here to make things worse. The level of self-restraint that they have, I don't think any country in the world has had. Because despite being bombarded by everything, they don't act accordingly. Like, they don't give right back in the same manner. They've always been restrained, and that's actually worked out for them because the damage done is less, and things don't escalate, and eventually they fizzle out. But people in India are upset because they don't want Indian territory to be illegally occupied, and most definitely not by China. So I think people are a little upset about that. But as far as reporting goes, I think you should read some of the top English language Indian outlets. There are several.
I know there's a Hindustan Times. I see them often.
Yeah, India Today is very good. Indian Express is good. Republic, WION is fantastic. First Post is fantastic. There are several amazing. They specifically focus on this geopolitics and defense issues. They're honest and they're fair. And I think going to the source is much better. And whatever you do, don't read the Chinese state media. They will turn everything on its head.
They're Al Jazeera.
It's like a comedy show over there.
Oh yeah, they're
Complete delusions.
Just like Al Jazeera.
Yeah.
And I never look at them. I have seen WION. I've seen a lot of
fantastic.
They do
very
great
good.
work.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of makes us talk about the economy. And maybe here's a question. Is there a way, if America has a strong leader going into 2025, if we have a strong leader, what could that leader do in terms of economics that would both help India in its battle for the land, but also to help stabilize Southeast Asia overall? Is there something you could point to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to say, the Trump administration took the Indo-Pacific region very seriously. They, during those 4 or 5 years, the Quad, which is India, Japan, Australia, and the U.S. This is they call it the Indo-Pacific, apparatus. I guess it's the security apparatus over there, specifically set up to counter what China's doing in the Indian Ocean, in the Indo-Pacific. And during Trump's administration, it was really on fire. Like, they were meeting a lot. They were tough. They were amped up. It was amazing to see these leaders come together. They're all on the same page. And then when there was a change of leadership, the Quad was the first thing to go. The Indo-Pacific wasn't anywhere in when you think about security threats. And this was the number one concern, I think. That region, Indo-Pacific, is so pivotal. If so much can erupt from there, so much damage.
Micronesia has had a lot of volatility, give or take.
The whole thing, South China Seas and then the Indo-Pacific. The heart of U.S. foreign policy should be the Indo-Pacific, and the Quad is very much at the center of that. So I was shocked when this Biden administration didn't take it seriously at all, and then COVID happened, and suddenly this Quad, instead of being a countering China bloc, it became some COVID delivery thing and human rights, and I don't know what the hell it became, but that's not why it was set up. Very, very unfortunate. So a strong leader has to reset the the foreign policy around that region, which is so important. They have to really get all these countries on board, and U.S. has to lead. See, they don't share a border; they're not present in that region,
Right.
but they want to have influence. So you're going to have to do, if you want the benefits that come from having influence and a say in a region that you're not even involved in, and these countries are letting you have that power, then you have to work with them, help them, fund them, invest, do what you need to do. You have all the resources, go in hard with them. So that I haven't seen America do. They have not taken
No.
the leadership.
Well, not in the
role.
last
Not in the
3.5
last 3
years.
4 yeah. So I'd like to see that. I think a strong government, strong military is very, very important. And I think the U.S. foreign policy needs a reset. You need to know who your friends are, your enemies are, your greatest threats. Because I think their eye is, I think what they think is a threat isn't really the big threat. The real threat is over here and they're completely ignoring it.
Well,
Very, very scary.
it's interesting because we're seeing the world militarize. I mean, Greenland and Iceland have been militarizing over the last year, 2 years. That's insane. I mean, really, Iceland, Greenland, who's going there? Why? But they are, and that's just the example of pretty much every nation has upped its military budgets and its military posture within the last 2 years. So, looking at the U.S. focusing in the Southeast Asia region, I think we failed. I mean, Japan is now building its first army after 45 years. I think that is a wonderful expression of where we have missed. But what can the U.S. do? Bring in resources, increase more trade, and work more closely with India, with Japan, against China.
Yes.
These are things you're saying that can have an impact. What is it? But a lot of countries are afraid of the American military. Hell, there are people in America afraid of the American military.
I think China is not, which
Well,
is really...
I think that's because of the leader, not because of the military.
I agree, yeah.
But is there a way that we can increase our posture that could better help all of Indo-Asia? Is there a way we can do that and yet not be oppressive?
Well, I think you can't be... Maybe we're at the stage where you have to really pick between one or the other. I think you can't sort of walk on eggshells and then also try to be a strong man and defend yourself both all at the same time. I think the U.S. needs to send a very strong message that any illegal activity, occupation, taking over all these border conflicts that China is involved in and will be or wants to get involved in. It's not just Taiwan. People, they don't even know much about what's going on that side of things, but they'll just say, oh, we're scared that it's going to take. I mean, you don't share a border with Taiwan either, and yes, they are an ally, but that's not a concern, and you should be concerned about the larger, what's going on in Southeast Asia and South Asia, and how that affects terrorism, and your adversaries really getting very empowered and against you and stuff. So they should, where's our sanctions? I mean, they're so hell-bent on all these ridiculous sanctions against Russia that don't work, by the way, and yet on the Chinese front, nothing. Crickets.
Well, there were, and they got removed.
And I have to say, Trump, you may like him, you may not. He made China his priority. I'm sorry, but he fought, in his mind, they were public enemy number one. Well, guess what? They are. So, and I think Americans during Trump's presidency, they also viewed China as such, and it was helpful because everybody got that message. Today, it's the other way around. There is no focus on that, and people have really taken their whole perspective around China has changed, and they're almost too scared to poke the bear, so to speak, while they're poking another bear. It's so silly. So I think you need, whether it's sanctions, trade, you have to counter it in whatever way. There are many ways to do it. You have to work closely with your allies, build better partnerships, gain their trust. I can tell you the trust between India and the U.S. is at a they're very close on the one hand, but the trust from the Indian side is very low. They don't trust US to come to their aid, and also the US has some funny bedfellows that you think, why are you in bed with these rogue? You're in sleeping with the enemy. Come on, after Afghanistan, you're still there.
See, that brings up something, and I know you were just talking in a prior meeting with someone else, interview with someone else, about BRICS.
Yes.
And see, that's a sticking point because India is part of BRICS.
Yes.
Now, for those who are unaware, it's essentially an alternative currency, global currency, to the dollar, which would include Brazil, Russia, India. You might leave me out.
So I will correct you. It's not, BRICS is not an alternative to the West. It's originally it was 5 of the top emerging economies coming together to do, to actually grow and become prosperous and also do more trade with each other. That was the original intention, and unfortunately it can be morphed into something else, and if it's China-led, it will get morphed into...
And that's what we're hearing. That's
it's
what we're
starting
hearing
to
here.
happen, but that's not what BRICS originally is, and that's not even the intention of BRICS today. Also, China and Russia have a problem with the West, but Brazil, South Africa, and India don't.
Right.
They never have. So I think you have 3 countries that are not anti-West at all. They're very pro-West. And then you have 2 that are very anti-West. So, and then these, I mean, India and China are in BRICS and they're adversaries. So some of these countries don't get along themselves. The BRICS currency also is not a de-dollarization tool, but you know, if it really takes off, the US dollar will be affected. The global dependency on it will reduce. So I think you have to look at it, and this is interesting. I love to speak on BRICS because I think it's the one point where Americans go into that it's us versus them mode.
Very much so.
They always think in black and white. They don't realize that the world is made up of many countries with their own aspirations, and now we're in a multipolar world. It's not unipolar. It's not just US, it's not just US-China, it's not bipolar anymore, thank God. It's several different power centers, and they all have their regional integration, they have their allies, they have their aspirations, they're all growing, some very, very strongly. They're even, beating the West on many different vectors, and that's very natural. 50 years from now, the whole world is going to be changed.
There's going to definitely be.
The largest economies are going to be different. The prosperous countries and the most populous countries will be very different than what they are today.
Oh, absolutely. But I can only say, and I thank you for updating me on BRICS. I've known, the most I've heard about it, and most of the discussion about it in the West has been on that monetary aspect.
Yes, the BRICS currency.
That has been a big concern.
When it hasn't been revealed yet, but it will be soon, and then it will be unveiled and used. That will affect. At this summit last year, I was on stage, and someone asked me about BRICS, and I said, you shouldn't be worried about BRICS until the day that Saudi Arabia gets involved. Well, that day has come.
Yes.
Because Saudi Arabia is in BRICS now. Now
Yes.
it's not just BRICS, it's BRICS plus plus plus.
23 countries.
Yes, and 6 top oil producing nations.
Mm-hmm.
So now the game is completely changed. And some of these countries don't have much love for the West, for various reasons. And again, even if they don't want even if it's not a conspiracy or anything like that, the success and the rise of BRICS will inadvertently affect the US dollar. It's the global dependency, it's how much it's used, its status as the global reserve currency. Someone asked me 10 years from now, will that still be the US dollar? I'm not so sure.
Well, I'm not sure.
3 years, yes. 10 years. And both
That's kind of scary.
kind of scary, and I think yourself and myself do predict I'm not going to say a World War III, but there will be the Omni Wars, there will be the Poly Wars coming up
Yes.
in this decade.
She
I coined that, by the way.
She coined that yesterday.
Poly War
Poly
and
Wars.
Poly Wars.
When I speak about the 3 simultaneous
Came
regional
from the Pretty
wars,
Effect, so yeah.
Poly Wars, that's what we're using now.
I will take credit for that. So, but we are emerging into that very, very ugly, scary, and that there will be a point, honestly, where it's each man for themselves. when this whole thing erupts, because I think the world's going to get divided. India's done so well with its non-aligned foreign policy. It has today it is the most successful foreign policy strategy because it's the only country that is friends with both Russia and US, Iran and Israel, Iran and Iraq.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how...
Because it is not taking sides. It's genuinely friends with both parties respect India. All these parties respect and like India. It's very genuine, and they treat their relationships independently. So it's fantastic. Strategic autonomy. Many other countries are actually trying to follow suit, which is great. But this poly-war crisis, when we're deep into it, there will come a point when even a neutral country like India will have to make a very, very clear, very specific decision on which way. And unfortunately, the West hasn't done a good job of decoupling Russia and China. That was his one job. It had one job to do, it has failed. And now it's upset that the world is going a different direction. Well, if you had separated them, you could all be against China. And then you don't have to have your allies be so split, which is what's happening now. So, and I don't see the decoupling happening at all. So, countries will have to make a decision. Look, from a spiritual perspective, truth will win. The good, the light will be the victor. I can see that. I think that's going to happen, but it's going to be very ugly before we get to that.
Recently, Macron, who's obviously France is having quite a conflict right now internally, as we're seeing pressure from the right to try and fix the problems of the left. And Macron last year mentioned that he wanted to ally more with China and introduce China more to all of Europe and decouple from the United States. He's reiterated that this year as well, which is a concern because he's not saying that about India. He's not saying that about any of Eurasia, just China alone. And I have to wonder, now seeing that the turmoil they're going through, as the people are looking to go more center-right, we're seeing Europe move more center-right.
Yes.
If Donald Trump is elected as is expected, the United States would be moving more center-right. But India isn't.
It's very centrist, I would say. We don't have right-wing in India. I always tell people there is no right-wing party in India. It's just left, and left. It's just different shades of left, center, left. I think what we do have is nationalistic parties, which is what Modi's party would be. And then we have other parties that are not all that about patriotism and nationalism and all that. So I would divide them more in that way. Some are more fiscally responsible and conservative than others, I would say. We have communist parties, we have far left, we have an actual left party. Right? So I think it's all about semantics. These left and right doesn't fit India's political ecosystem in some way. But I think it's very scary for France to, not see the Chinese threat and to now suddenly really bring them into the European mix. I mean, Germany is doing that too. You should be doing the opposite. You should be making sure you don't get even more addicted and dependent on them because they're having a serious global supply chain crisis, an internal crisis, property crisis. Their financial situation is so bad that they are not a good investment property to bet on right now. So run while you can. And what he is doing is the opposite, really dangerous. And I think the people don't like it. No wonder they voted against him, but he got into bed with the far left and then they're so happy that they won. Well, they didn't win. The people wanted, the people's voice has not been heard. The people lost. They are the biggest, French people are the losers here. They're getting a government that they didn't vote for, that they hate, that is going to destroy them. Because I just found out, I just heard that the far left wants to tax the rich 90%. The last thing that France needs is more socialism. It's already so broken. I spent 2 months in Europe, mostly in south of France, and paradise, yes, great wine and good food, fantastic weather, but that's about it. Everything else is falling down in front of your very eyes.
That's because there's always a protest in France.
Yes, and
Just
a
wait a
strike
week.
and a strike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a protest and a strike every other week.
Yes.
We're running out of time, and I do appreciate that we were able to put this together so quickly and to be able to speak with you today. Let me reiterate the best way for people to hear more of what you're doing and to learn more about the Omnia Institute. What websites would they go to?
So I'm all over social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's Preity Upala, Preity Upala. And on YouTube, I have my own show, I have my own podcast, the Preity Experience, or the Preity-verse. So find me there. I'm writing a book. I write a lot. You can find all my articles online. And I appear a lot on radio, TV, and podcast shows as a political commentator, and it's global. So you just find me. I'm there. And my book is going to come out soon, hopefully next year too. So watch this.
See that. I want to see that.
Watch this space. My website will be up and running soon too. So I'm very much have a strong online presence. Just find me and reach out. You know, people randomly will call me from everywhere and ask me all sorts of questions. I'm also an international speaker. I speak everywhere. So if you have an event you'd like to speak, you'd like me to speak at, please reach out.
Absolutely. Now, I always like to end every interview I do with one very simple question. Now, we've covered a large range of things, and these are deep subjects that literally we could spend hours, and we were spending hours talking about previously. And so I know there's many things we get in touch, but if there is one other thing that you would like to share with my audience, something that they need to know at this point, I want to give you that opportunity to share that.
Well, specifically to the American audience, I would say that this U.S. election is so important. It's so consequential globally, especially for geopolitics and geoeconomics. I think the outcome of this election will dictate the kind of wars that this country is going to continue to be involved in, the new wars that it's going to find itself in, its economic situation, how its budget is going to be used, whether democracy survives or not, and whether your voice even matters, what agency you have as a people. I think vote with your heart, your soul, your conscience. Just take your vote very carefully. Vote. Go out and speak your mind and your heart, and make sure that that's heard. And fight. If you want to fight for electoral integrity in this country, I think you should do something about it. There are many movements. Get involved. Get involved. If you don't get involved in politics, trust me, politics is involved in you, whether you like it or not. And so you might as well just sign up and join the bandwagon and make sure that you put this country first, this great country with all the values and rights that it offers us and is supposed to offer us. And be proud, be proud Americans, and have that patriotism because it's so important. And also travel. Read about the rest of the world, because one thing I always find is Americans, the whole world comes here, but you really need to inform yourself about what's going on around, because I think the lack of that knowledge is one of the reasons why people are making very bad decisions. Politicians, as well as lobbyists, and then people are signing up for it. So if you knew more, you would be making more informed decisions or fighting back on some of these very, very dangerous laws that can come about, especially in the foreign policy realm. So really get involved in all of that.
Well, I recommend all of those aspects that you mentioned. We talked about it. Vote no matter who you're voting for, but have a reason for that vote. Learn more. We often talk about international politics on the program, and obviously that's why we're enjoying having a conversation with you as well. And hopefully this leads others to try it for themselves as well. And of course, be involved in your politics, whatever your position is. Make sure that you're involved in it because it's going to affect you. With that said, Preity, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. And I know it's going to be very active. We're not done with Freedom Fest. There's another day, lots more to still come. But folks, I want you to stay in touch and keep watching.
Thank you so much.